and hopefully, don't worry, I'll fix the sound after because I always do. And then people, they message me and go, Vito, what the fuck's with the sound? And I go, blow out your ass, deal with it. All right. All right, so folks, you're listening to the Wrecking Crew Comedy Podcast, and I've got a very special guest. I love my wrestling, and a man that he beyond knows wrestling. He is a producer of two documentaries. One's coming out that's gonna kick ass, and the other one was a monster hit. It was one of my favorite movies of all time, and that was The Wrestler. And he was the producer of that, and also he's the producer of a new documentary called 350 Days, and we'll get into that in a minute. He'll explain why it's called that, and if you think about wrestling in 350 days, you'll kind of understand what that means. So, without further ado, I give you Mr. Evan Ginsberg, all the way from New York City. Evan, thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So, you were talking earlier about you had to walk off of. I heard there was another rant that you did. I call it rants, but first of all, it's you got to see the shithole country I'm living in right now. It's absolutely snowing out, and I hate it. So, if there's a place like Florida Keys, and you're listening, and you want somebody to bother you, or if you're a good-looking woman and you want company of a disgusting creep, please call me, message me. I will. I give great foot massages. Because I really want to get the hell out of here, and I don't see that in the foreseen future. So a buddy of mine just won $35 million on the jackpot on the soup. We have a Lotto Max up here, and anyways, I think I'll never hear from him again. I think he's gone. Like I message him saying congratulations, and nothing, and it's just like he's gone, and yeah, it's kind of sad. I grew up with the guy, so it kind of hurts that way. But I think when you win that type of money, I think it just makes lawyers and then everyone's gonna go. And I message him, Evan, saying I'm not gonna ask you for money, you know. Yeah, I'm not, which is a complete lie. But
Yeah.
I'm seriously. I wasn't gonna. I even message him saying I'm not gonna ask you for money, you schmuck. You just tell me how you're doing. I didn't message him for Christmas because I had a throat thing and I couldn't talk to him. Anyways, when you win that type of money, you're off to the Florida Keys, and I'm stuck here. So I hope one day he takes pity and says, you know what? I'll get him a place in the Florida Keys, and he could stay there and be a miserable little weasel that he is out in the Florida Keys watching old WWE or old wrestling tapes. I wanted to tell you a comic I used to work with, Mike Dambra. He used to introduce me to. I worked with him in Buffalo a lot, and what he used to do was he used to put in. It was really weird. He had a duffel bag of old VHS. I even forgot what they're called now. VHS tapes, and he would put them in, and they were all old wrestling shows. I mean, from the 70s. He had some, really, really old stuff of promos. And I'm like, Mike, why are we watching this? He's like, watch, just watch. And I was so into it. We'd go do a show, we'd run back, and I'd be like, Mike, put one of those shows on. And it would be, Florida wrestling or old. We're talking the Von Erichs. That's a tragedy unto itself. But these old how promos. He's like, look, this is how a promo's done, and you would sit there and you would watch an old promo, and it was really weird watching Ivan Putski before he used to be a big bloated guy, and then he shredded, and he was still a massive guy. But then I had no idea it was him, and Mike had to tell me and say that's Ivan Putski when he started off. But one of the best guys to throw a promo that I enjoyed was Superstar Billy Graham, when he would just sit there and go, I'm going to introduce him to pain, to American pain. I'm going to break his ligaments. Look at these arms. You look at the poor announcer would be looking at him, and you'd have a superstar, towering over him, just showing, look at these arms. I'm in the desert picking up rocks. I'm drinking mineral water. You sitting at home, with your fat bellies, eating your TV dinners. Oh God, I loved it. So, anyways, I just fell in love with that, and when I was a kid, I fell in love with that too. We didn't get a whole lot of Mid South wrestling, but we would get the either Stampede wrestling, or we would get when WWE, it was WWF back then. They used to have shows. What was it called? It was they used to have shows on, and guys used to, we'd be at school just beating the shit out of each other, trying out these moves. Um, so, anyways, let me do another line of coke, and then that way Evan could get a word in. And so, Evan, what got you so in love with wrestling?
As a kid, it was almost like Marvel superheroes and villains. They were larger than life. It was being transported into a whole different world. And, as a kid, you get bullied for a variety of reasons. And, that's pretty much the theme of pro wrestling, where the villain does something devious to the face, and ultimately the face conquers the villain and he gets his. At least that's the way it used to be. And it's it's just something that a 12-year-old would love. And that's when I first started watching it. And I've been a fan nearly a half century.
Well, that's the thing that I wanted to talk to you about. That I, as a child, I used to believe, like, I knew that they weren't, you know, I mean, I asked my dad, I said, Dad, is it, like, my God, that guy's getting a beating. I didn't say it like that. My dad would be like, what did you just say? I would say, Dad, they're killing that guy. They should call the police. And my grandmother would sit there and smile and play a crossword puzzle. She was into crossword puzzles.
Yeah.
And I would just go, why aren't they calling it? But they were beating the living shit. I grew like, I used to hate him so much, but it was Ray the Crippler Stevens. But I grew to love him. Um, and he just beat the living shit out of Snuka. I mean, badly with the coconut. It was the coconut incident where no, it was a pile driver. Remember when he just was pile driving
Yeah.
him on concrete? And I'm freaking out. And I was so angry, and I'm like, why aren't they calling the police on this guy? And I go to tell my buddies, and I grew up with guys that were much older than me, and I said, this is wrong. They should call the police. They killed Snuka. And my
Yeah.
buddy said, he was much older than me. He just said, he goes, they're not gonna. He loved wrestling too, and he goes, Vito, do you think? He goes, we're gonna play fight. We always play fight, right? Yeah. And do you notice I, I, I don't hit you. I don't punch you across the face, even though I could. And I said, yeah. And he goes, what would happen if I were to punch you 20 times across the face? And then I clued in, right? And he says, Vito, they got to wrestle the next night, these guys. They kill themselves. They really do hurt themselves. But if if Ray were to put his head and do that to Snuka, Snuka would be dead. Okay? So he kind of explained it like that, and I understood. But it was always an art form to me. It was theater. It was
But
I
ironically, Snooker, when Piper hit him with the coconut, he actually did get a
Yeah, he
concussion.
did. Because
And
yeah,
these guys have had tremendous injuries because gravity is real, and they were throwing their bodies around literally 350 days a year, and
I, well,
even today, 250 days a year.
well,
And
yeah, they when that happened with Snuka, a lot of people don't know that, but Snuka was out cold for a second because Roddy hit him so hard with the coconut, it
yeah,
actually
yeah,
knocked him
he had
out.
a legitimate concussion.
Yeah,
I knew Jimmy and his wife. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, oh, you knew Jimmy. How was he? Like as a I've heard stories where what's his name, the Nasty Boys, Snuka would get Brian Knobs absolutely shit faced just for a joke when Brian Knobs was working as a ring boy, just to mess with him. How was Snuka?
Well, the Snooker I knew was in recent years, and he was just the sweetest old guy. I mean, I didn't know him personally in his prime.
Oh God, do you remember him in his prime? Do you remember what he
Oh my!
looked like?
I was there. I was there the night that he jumped off the cage on Morocco. I
Oh
was
God,
physically there,
even
and
Morocco.
Morocco was unbelievable. There's a website, ProWrestlingStories.com, where I wrote about being in the garden and what that experience was like because it was electric. It was
Oh,
unbelievable just to experience
it's
that.
weird, but you probably wouldn't have known it, but you know now that Cactus Jack was there too.
Yeah, he was sitting there also. Yeah,
And I mean,
yeah.
and there's so many people that say that, and in the back of my head, I'm thinking you're full of shit. But I totally
No,
believe you. I believe you. But
I started going. I started going in '74. That was nearly 10 years later. So it
that
was,
match alone. I mean, the size of those two men. I mean, I've never seen Morocco. People forget how incredibly, like, just muscle. He was just this. He had a vein on his, I think it was his left or right shoulder that would pop out an inch, and I swear it was like you could put a golf ball through that vein. He was one of the largest men, and Jimmy Snuka, not Jimmy, Jimmy Hart told a story of who he'd be managing, and he said he walked into a room and laying on the floor was this behemoth of a man, and it was Don Morocco laying on the floor having a nap in Vince's
hmm.
office. And they said, you're going to be managing Morocco, Don over here. And Don was just taking a nap, and Jimmy Hart's like, that is the biggest man I've ever seen in my life. Like that just tells you like how what a monster of a man. And Snuka had a physique of a god. I mean, he really did.
and and the thing with Morocco is he was one of the greatest heels of all
Oh
time.
yeah,
When he was Intercontinental Champion um,
beach
in
bum.
WWF,
Yeah.
he was amazing. Many times people were there more so for his match than for Backlund's, which was ironic.
Well, Backlund, I think Vince made a mistake, and nothing against Backlund, but I heard Backlund is one of the, he could work and he could blow you up in a ring. His workouts were legendary, and there's a picture of him beside Andre the Giant now, and he looks like a little kid. And then there's another picture of him and with Bruno Sammartino. And so years, people have been fed this monster of Bruno Sammartino, and then all of a sudden you get Backlund, and people just they just weren't buying it. They wanted that. I think Bruno was 270 at his when he was healthy, 270 muscle. Like he never did steroids, but he was just a beast of a man. And then Backlund never did steroids, and he just I think people just didn't buy it, and they wanted that's when things started to change. I think people you wanted to see it was that old saying of he would, Bobby Heenan was famous for this. He would talk you into watching somebody getting their ass kicked. So you would watch, and you would get so mad that you'd say, "I'm gonna buy a ticket, go watch this guy get his ass kicked because I can't stand him," you know. And Morocco always had that smugness that you just wanted to see him. And I loved Morocco. I was always for some reason I was always drawn to the villains because I always thought the villains were. I always kind of felt bad in a way because I don't know. It was just something about them that these days villains. I just know that they're reading from a script. I know they're not real. But I think everybody down deep inside wants to be kind of a villain just for a day, just to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
And these guys got to be that. But I would hear these horrible stories of, you know, they would go to a restaurant, be treated like shit or people spit in their food, or, I sent you a link of Ivan Koloff, who was one of the sweetest men on the planet, and and they would throw knives, chairs, rocks, beer bottles, they would
Oh yeah, back in those days, the fans were
completely nuts.
basically mocks, and there were many riots. Johnny Valiant told me that the fans were stomping him one day, and Butcher Ball Vachon came out and saved his life. And I mean, it happened time and time again. Guys were stabbed and blasted. He had somebody throw acid in his face. It was crazy. Moolah was stabbed.
Moolah, yeah. Oh God,
Blackjack Mulligan was slashed open.
Yeah.
I mean, people took it very, very seriously back then. Nikolai and the Iron Sheik used to hide in the ambulance at Madison Square Garden and sneak out in the middle of the show. They would actually go in the ambulance to be driven out of the arena because the fans were outside waiting to kill them.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, things have improved today. I mean, I don't appreciate how cartoon-like it's gotten.
No.
But at least nobody wants to murder the wrestlers.
No, but I think if they had 10 times better security and paid a little more towards security to make sure, to me, one of the downers in my life. You were mentioning a few names. Nicole Bass. I was supposed to have an interview with her, and
Nicole Bass was a close friend of mine.
yeah, well, I was supposed to have an interview with her, and I put it off because something came up, and she gave me her number and everything, and we were supposed to have this interview, and I said, I'm not going to ask anything stupid. And she's like, how boring. She goes, you ask me whatever you want. And I was like, okay. And she used to call me Superman, which was really weird because there's a picture of me and I'm wearing a Captain America shirt. And she called me, hey, Superman. So she's a very sweet, kind person. And it broke my heart that she's gone. So that's another thing I wanted to ask you about was, all the guys. Yeah, I'll talk to you in a sec about that. But before I lose my train of thought, to me, the biggest failure in wrestling, they could still, it could still be like the old days. And people say, "Oh, you can never go back to the old days." No, wrestling was the way it was for a very long time. Okay, the problem was you got to remember wrestling was kind of like the mafia. Okay, you didn't talk about it. If it was very hard to get into that business. If you wanted to be a wrestler, they trust me. I mean, Hulk Hogan talks about it. They broke his leg. You want to get in wrestling business, son? They broke his leg, and they showed up the next day. If you watch the Russian Bear documentary, that poor guy, he thought he was at a show and he thought that his favorite wrestler was getting beat up, and he grabbed a chair and he hit it over the man's head, that the bad guy's head, the heel,
Hmm.
and they kicked him out and said, "Get out of here!" And he had to come back the next day because he was going to start his wrestling school, and they told him, "Oh, all right, so you want to be a wrestler?" And they put him in the middle of the ring, and he's just a young kid, and he's standing out in the middle of the ring, and the guy he hit the chair with was his opponent. Came out fuming, screaming, yelling, swearing, "You're the one that hit me over the head." And it was just to make him shit his pants to see if he would run. And the
Hmm.
guy said to him, "Don't ever do that again. You understand?" And he said, "I'll never do that again, sir." And he said, "Okay." And he taught him, wrestling moves and how to wrestle. And he said, you know, that to me is wrestling. Wrestling should be, and it should always be, a closed society. I don't care. Call it Illuminati, whatever you want to call it. If you believe that shit, just call it. It just needs Twitter. You got guys, wrestlers, going on their Twitter accounts talking about their matches. I would take all their phones and break them.
Hmm.
They wouldn't be allowed to. I mean, you had talk about the work that all these guys did over the years, like Ivan Koloff, um, where he had to pretend his son would think he was mentally challenged sometimes because he would start talking like the Russian bear in front of people, and his son would think, "Dad, what is wrong with you?" And get in the car, and
Yeah.
because somebody, he didn't want a fan or somebody to say, "Hey, that Russian bear he really speaks English. He's not Russian."
Yeah. Break. They didn't like to break
Yeah, they
kayfabe
would
back
never.
then.
But you get fired. You get fired if you were caught. If we were wrestling together and you were my opponent and we were caught talking to each other, we would be fired immediately. Okay, and rightfully so. So for years they would have this thing about, it was very important that it's a society that if you want in, you get in. But once you're in, you keep your mouth shut and you don't blabber. You don't go on Twitter. You don't do this. And people are like, well, you're giving away a person's rights. Fuck the rights. How about making 500,000 a year or 200,000 or whatever? I would do that and screw my rights. I don't need to Twitter about my opponent. I would Twitter about it, saying how I'm going to kill him and how I feel bad for his family, and I hope he's got, it's going to be bad at his funeral. That's how I'd Twitter about it or talk about it. But I would never sit there and say, this is written. We got writers. We got, what the fuck am I coming to the show for? Like, to me, Brian Pillman and Roddy Piper, you kind of knew they were off balance, but they weren't. Well, Pillman was a little off balance, but Piper was one of the nicest guys on the planet. But you knew when he was on, he was a scary man. I mean, you would look at this guy, you would sit there and go, "This is one guy I don't want to get stuck in an elevator with." Okay, and they all had different physiques. You had guys with big, they looked like, okay, so you had the behemoths, but you had guys that, Jerry the King Lawler did not look like a steroid. I was watching matches today of him in the Texas Tornado, and it looked like night and day, but they were still enjoyable. Okay, they were still, you still enjoyed the match. They didn't need to be two monster dudes. And it's kind of sad too, because I saw a match where it was Rick Rude, Bobby Heenan was the manager. Then you had Rick Rude and Mr. Perfect teaming up, and they were going up against the Texas Tornado and Ultimate Warrior, and we all know all five are gone. Bobby left because of the hell that he went through, but the other guys died of, you could say it's attributed to too much partying, to steroids, to whatever, but they died way too soon. Um, Ivan Koloff. You watch Ivan Koloff. He just passed away 2 years ago. He could barely move, that man, just from the beating he took. And to me, it's like all the work that they made, all the work that those guys did over, and wrestling worked for decades upon decades. It worked that it was this close knit family. Once you're in, you're in. Once you're out, you're not out until we tell you you're out. And you had a respect factor where you didn't really talk about the business. Where you had guys now, as soon as they leave, like CM Punk, he'll go on a show and talk about, stupid shit that happened. And it's like, really? Like, who cares, dude? You're making $1 million a year. You're giving me Hunter Helmsley to fight for $1 million a year. I'd fight the wife, okay, if you want, in a dress.
Yeah.
Okay, I could care less. So to me, I think wrestling destroyed itself with Vince and uh, what's his name? What's his name? Every time I think of his name, I just think, oh God.
Triple H.
No, the writer, the one that they said he was a genius, and he wasn't a fucking genius at all. Uh,
Vince Russo.
that's it, Russo, where they told the fans, this is all made up, guys. Don't worry about it. This is all fake. So enjoy the show. And I'm thinking, what a stupid thing to do. As a fan, I don't want you to tell me that it's fake. I want to make believe, okay? Like, what's the point? It's like, watching, it's like, my wife's like, who cares? And I'm like, okay, well, you like your little Coronation Street or your soap opera? Well, how would you like it at the end of the soap opera? Everybody would come out, introduce themselves, and say, and show you the script that they read for that day's episode, and say, we'll see you tomorrow, same time, and next. Oh yeah, by the way, this is the script we got for tomorrow. Stay tuned; it's gonna be amazing. They wrote me, I'm gonna get killed, but I'm not really gonna get killed, because it's a script, and that's what they told me. I'm not really happy about this, but I'm gonna talk to the writer, and hopefully they could change a few things. That's what they did to wrestling, pretty much, by saying a bunch of monkeys rate the show, and it's fake, and nobody really gets hurt, and it's like, no, people get hurt, and it's fake. If you wanted to be fake, either you're a wrestling fan or you're not. That's how it is, okay? And what they're doing now, wrestling will never, like, they're like, you know uh there'll be another Rock, or there'll be another Stone Cold Steve. I'm like, screw that. There's not ever going to be any of that shit. You need to bring in wrestling the way it was. And you need to bring in guys that it shouldn't be just one guy you go watch to go see a show. I used to go just to go watch the Demolition, you know? I mean, they were my tag team, or my favorite tag team who would wrestle the Demolition was the Hart Foundation. I mean, and tag teams now are a joke compared to what they once were. Like, tag teams were absolutely at a different level, and people forget what a tag team was. Anyways, it just, so what do you think of how the wrestling business has been treated lately?
I think Vince has turned it into an absolute circus, and I think the discerning fans, for the most part, have to turn to New Japan Pro Wrestling, New Japan World, the website. They have to follow Ring of Honor. They have to support their local indies. I mean, I sat at Madison Square Garden a few weeks ago, and I would say 8 out of 10 matches were an utter waste of time. You know, I was numb. I was literally numb. And Cena and Reigns had a decent main event, and there wasn't much else on the show. So
what a waste of time.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the greatest talent bases in history. they have Gallows and Anderson come out, and one of the top tag teams in the world, and they're doing bad comedy and
Yeah,
singing,
Jesus. I know.
and
That's
then they walk off. Then they walk off without even wrestling.
yeah,
And I go, this is like your worst nightmare.
yeah,
It's like,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So then I'm kind of like, well, why did I subject myself to this? Because you always go with the hope of seeing some good wrestling, and which I'm gonna do tonight at a local indie, which is just I enjoy it more, even though they're not as polished, even though it's not as slick. It's on a shoestring. I'm gonna go down to the local Elks Lodge, and for 10 or 15 or $20, just relax and hang out and have a beer with some friends, and go back to the roots of the sport. I don't need I don't need the slick WWE corporate product. It's stultifying for the most part. I mean, and I'm not going to make generic. You know, on any given pay-per-view, they'll have their 2 or 3 good matches. On a 3-hour Raw, they'll have their 20 or 30 minutes of quality wrestling. It's not an utter waste, or I would have given up on it entirely. But
You
for
get
the most part, it's about marketing. It's about hawking gimmicks and selling T-shirts, and it's not about the wrestling.
it's about the kiddies. It's about
It's a sea of kiddies. It's a PG product, and you're sitting with in a just an ocean of children, and it's just not that rough blue collar
yeah.
sport that it was.
I mean, and that's the parents' fault. I mean, if it shouldn't be the wrestling's job to teach a kid that. Okay, here an example. Freddie Blassie used to be the vampire, remember? And there was a
Yeah.
kid that used to have freaking nightmares of Freddie Blassie. Okay, believe it or not, classy Freddie Blassie. That sweet old man. And what happened was the kid was so traumatized by him that they told him, and they brought the kid to the back, and Freddie came out. Blassie came out and told the little kid, "Hey, it's just I'm not really a vampire. I'm not gonna. I don't kill my opponent. I don't drink their blood. It's just a show. Okay, do you understand? Can you keep that a secret for me? Now give me a hug, okay?" And that helped out the kid. The parent is an incompetent fool that should say, "You know what, son? He's not really a vampire, okay? Your uncle,
Yeah.
your mother, yes, but
Yeah.
he's not a vampire, okay? We're gonna go see a show. He's not gonna touch you. Let's just say this: if you think he's gonna kill his opponent, let's come back in a month and see it. Hopefully, the guy will be back in the territory, but I'm sure you'll see him wrestle again. I promise you, okay? He's gonna be okay. I know it looks like it's not, but he's gonna be fine, son." That's the parents' job. That's not the WWE, and I don't care about this corporate shit. The corporate thing, there, corporate. We gotta make sure that the fans are happy. Fans aren't happy, okay? Who are happy are when I was a kid and watch a show. How many times you walk down the street and do you ever see a guy wearing a wrestling shirt? You don't.
Not back in the day.
No, but you did. Back in the 70s and 80s, you did. Guys wore them. They weren't embarrassed of it. It was kind of like, yeah, this is the guy I like.
Yeah,
this.
in the mid '80s, they really started with the marketing. Prior
Right.
to that, you didn't really see much.
Well,
of
they
it.
didn't hit on the marketing back in the 70s because it never really dawned on them. It was, hey, let's sell shirts. It never really, uh, but when Vince is like, let's have, you could buy ice cream bars of Hulk Hogan or Macho Man Randy Savage. I mean, they were even trying to do it back in the early '80s, And to me, it's like, okay, why can't they bring that in the way it once was? Like the way that I know you can't relive, the way it once was, but it would be just a dream to have it, um, you know, eh, not so written, not so what's going to happen. Or, I mean, a great match I thought was that I saw, and they only brought it in. People are sick of this shit. When they bring in a guy like Goldberg, and you knew it was going to be like a 6 month deal where he was going to lose against Brock. He kicks Brock's ass, and I loved it. And I thought, this is great. But, they bring in these guys for a short run of, a year, pay them big bucks, and that's it, and it's done. It's over with. And I never understood that. I'm like, screw that. I would have told Goldberg to say, you're going to sign a 3-year contract. We're going to bring you back as, the wrecking machine. And you're going to have awesome matches against another beast, Brock Lesnar. And you're going to have great, awesome matches. That's what people want. And the kiddies, you know what? Um, they're like, oh, we don't want any blood whatsoever. No, there's no blood. Well, you know what? Accidents happen. It's easy. You fall. Like I wish I was running the thing. I'd be like, you fall, go under the ring, cut yourself, come back. It's not that hard. You had an accident, okay? And then the network would scream at me, and I'd be like, I'll handle it. Listen, it was an accident. It won't happen again. And when it happens again, I just say the exact same thing. There's nothing I could do when a man jumps off a ring and an accident happens where he cuts himself. And actually, he's blading himself. But it's an accident, okay? So deal with it. And if there's blood, there's blood. And if he agrees to, he's going to show a bit of blood, so be it, you know? But at least you walk away going, like, I don't need blood to be entertained. But I'm just saying, you don't need to do it for the kids. You can do it for the adults.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what were you all pissed off about? You were saying the 401ks. Sorry, earlier on.
I was saying that wrestlers who were working 250 days a year, or back in the day, 350 days in the year, which is where we get the title of our documentary, they're entitled to 401ks, pensions, health insurance. They're sacrificing their bodies night in and night out, and it's $1 billion corporation. And you know, this should be a basic. And I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, this should be a basic. You know what I think? I think the guys fall apart after they're done wrestling because, again, you're the documentary, and I want people are gonna. The Wrestler was an amazing movie, one of the best
Thanks.
ones, and it really rarely do I cry like a little boy. But I mean that movie made if you even if you're not a wrestling fan, you watch that movie, it just tears. It just makes you, when he
Yeah,
just says,
I was associate producer on The Wrestler, and basically I was the wrestling guy, and I brought in the ring and Mickey Rourke's stunt double and the many of the wrestlers, including Necro Butcher. I even acted with them in the autograph scene
right.
with Mickey, and yeah, we were very proud of it, and I think what he did was an iconic performance, and I think it's going to stand the test of time. I think 100 years from now, people will be watching it because of his performance.
I think it just made, Jim Cornette, and I enjoy Jim Cornette, but he hated the movie, and he's like, it makes people it makes wrestlers look like losers, and it makes them look like like there was that sad part in it when he couldn't wrestle anymore, and he was at this signing. Remember, he had to make money.
Yeah, that's the scene I acted with him. If
Yeah.
you watch it,
Yes.
that's
Yes. Yeah.
me. Yeah,
So
yeah.
but I'm sorry, Jim, but that's a fact for most of the guys that don't make it to the very top, and even the guy.
Let me tell you the history of that scene. That scene was not in the original screenplay. So I took Darren Aronofsky and the executive producer Scott Franklin, the money guy, and the screenwriter, and a few other guys to a wrestling convention, and there was Lou Albano and Moolah and Mae Young. We're going back 10, 11, 12 years now, and you know, and they're sitting. Iron Sheik. Iron Sheik is asleep, literally asleep, because there's so few people there, and it
Yeah.
was grim. It was absolutely grim, and it was so grim that the screenwriter wrote it into the movie,
Yeah.
and so for Jim to say that's not realistic, and I happen to love Jim Cornette, and the Midnight Express are my favorite tag team of all time. I happen to not agree,
Yeah.
but we basically I took Darren and the crew to indie wrestling every weekend for pretty much 6 months prior to shooting. So they wanted to capture it. They wanted to make it realistic. They weren't looking to do anything slick like WWE. Basically he told the story. There are plenty of broke wrestlers
Yes.
who have, a variety of issues with money being at the top of it quite often, and physical ailments because of what they did for a living. And that's the reason that these guys should be taken care of after they sacrifice themselves for this sport. I
Yeah.
mean,
I agree. I'm sorry. I agree. I'm not saying it because I'm a mark, but I totally agree. I think that these guys fuck themselves up so bad that they don't feel it while they're.
gravity is not phony. I mean, if
Well,
you
not
throw
just not
somebody and
just
time it,
yeah, but not just gravity. I mean, if me and you were to wrestle, and we were, put it this way. I mean, Mickey Rourke said it best when he would box. They would say, "Don't you feel if somebody were to slap you across the face right now, that would hurt like hell." But when you box, and I used to box, after a while, your body, um, you kind of get used to it, and it kind of you get a not a callus, but you get a the nerve endings just go kind of numb, and then if you don't get slapped or punched there in a month's time, when you do get punched, it hurts twice as much because it's come back. Now, picture being a wrestler for 350 days and doing that shit. Your body is kind of like it gets accumulated, like it gets adjusted to feeling that pain. Okay, and if you add in the party and the pills and all everything else, it helps. But then the day will come when wrestling will get rid of you. That's what happens. It just says you just can't do it anymore. And that's when the pain really sets in, when the body, you feel, you're like, again, I'll go back to Ivan Koloff, um, um, the demolition guy. He remembers seeing him in the shower. This is how tough Ivan Koloff was. He'd be in the shower and he'd tell him he's fine, and he'd be in the bathroom. He knows 3 in the morning. He would look in the bathroom and he could see Ivan Koloff could he was using his other hand to pick up his other hand, and he couldn't pick it up over his arm, and he never complained about it. And then he asked him the next day, "Are you okay?" And he's, "Oh, I'm fine." Ivan was like, "I am totally fine." and he would pick guys up in the ring and throw them, and then again he would see him back in the hotel room in another town, barely lifting up his arm. And breaks your heart. You're like, for fuck's sakes, man. Like, I understand that's
Ivan was one of the all time great heels, and
oh, was he
he main
ever?
evented Madison Square Garden 13 times. He beat Bruno back when it meant something for the title. And it's an utter disgrace that he's not in the WWE Hall of Fame. An
Oh yeah.
absolute disgrace.
Yeah.
And, Ivan Koloff back in the day, I mean, he main evented everywhere. In the NWA with the Russians, he was a huge, huge star. He wrestled Gagne in the AWA. I mean, how this guy is not in the Hall of Fame is absurd. Absolutely
Yeah.
absurd.
Yeah. It is. It's
Besides the money he generated.
oh yeah, and he didn't die with a whole lot of money. That's another thing, and Nikita gave a great. You would see him. Remember the size of Nikita? My
Yeah.
God, that man was a monster. But you just sit there and go, there's got to be something that that of course wrestling now is kid friendly and stuff, and they're like, well, if they do drugs or whatever, we'll help them with their drug rehabilitation. And I'm like, well, why not just make it that they work? They don't need to work 350 days. Why don't you just make it that they could see their family? And like growing up, half these guys grow up without their dad. That's got to mess up the kid. When dad comes
That's
home.
exactly what our movie's about.
Yeah.
350 days, they're on the road. The divorces. You're not seeing your children. You can't get home for Christmas. You can't get home for Thanksgiving. It's just
It's
it's a
sad.
devastating lifestyle, physically, mentally, emotionally, as far as your family. Bret Hart, Billy Graham are the stars of the movie, and we have Greg Valentine, Tito Santana, and many, many others. There's 3 dozen legendary wrestlers in it, all telling their stories. And, it's a brutal business, and these guys deserve to be taken care of. And that's basically, what we've done with this film. And it
Well,
will be out this year.
yeah, and people say, well, that's the life they chose. And I'm like, yeah, well, you know what? Blow it out your ass. They're working, okay? And they love what they're doing. You think a guy that drills oil out in the middle of, in some barren, straight piece of shit or an ice, those guys that, those crab fishermen, that every year one or two get killed, or I think a lot more than that. But you think they do it because they love it? They do it because it's money, and they don't see their kids. Well, they see them for the 6 months they get home, and but wrestlers do it because they love the business, they love what they're doing, they love entertaining, and to be a wrestler, I think three things you need. Okay, you need charisma. You need to know how to talk. You gotta kind of know how to wrestle. Which what's really. They used to say Hulk Hogan didn't know how to wrestle. If you watch him earlier on, he did know how to wrestle. He used
Oh
to.
yeah, he did the superhero stick for WWF, but he knew how to wrestle. He worked Japan.
Yeah, he was a good wrestler. So, but he's one of those guys that. I'm sorry, a lot of people. If you're starting off and you're a wrestler, that's your dream. Your dream is I want to make millions of be a superstar, and once I make it as a superstar, then I could quit, and me and the family could have we could live wherever we want or whatever. But it's like that 10-year plan everyone's got, or that 20-year plan, and nothing ever works out the way it does. Something always happens, and the ones that do make it, there are the thousands upon thousands that don't. So, and I think that's something that the movie 350 days is going to show that these guys, they worked their ass. I mean, take Billy Graham. He had everything, everything. I mean, he had the physique. I remember telling my dad, I go, Dad, how much is that guy? How much can that guy lift? And my dad said, whatever he wants. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, he was a beast of a man. And then you see him now, and you have a tear in your eye, and you realize he was supposed to be the next Hulk Hogan. If he was healthy, if he didn't have the health issues, he would have been the next Hulk Hogan. So in his head, having that and having his body um, give out on him at the worst possible time. I mean, Vince McMahon does that whole thing about sees him walking down a street and says, "Superstar, are you okay?" And Billy Graham's like, "Yeah, I'm fine, Vince. I'm totally fine." And his hip was just fucked. And he had to tell
Yeah.
Vince, everything's fine. I'm totally fine. And Vince knew something was really wrong with him. So he's like, well, I got to find a new guy. I got to get a new toy. And he goes and, he gets, Hulk Hogan, and the rest is history. So imagine being Billy Graham, where you're like at the pinnacle of success and the charisma. I mean, you listen to, the things that he used to say were just so beautiful. Man of Steel, too sweet. Remember he used to say, "What God?" I used to memorize them and just
Man of the hour, man
man
with the power, too
too
sweet
sweet
to
to
be
be
sour.
sour. Yeah,
Yeah,
the teacher's pet and a man's regret. What you see is what you
that's
get,
right.
and what you don't see is better yet. Woo! Yeah, he was
Yeah.
he was
Yeah.
absolutely awesome, and
I used to see Graham headline the Garden, and it was electric. It was electric, and he was not a great technical wrestler. It was just
no,
the charisma was off the charts.
God, he used to flex. Remember, he used to just flex, and everybody would just go, "Holy shit! Look at the size of that guy's arms." And
And
you know,
Graham was something.
he was something, and you kind of feel bad. People are like, "Well, he did it to himself." I'm sorry. Well, the world did it to him. Okay, like the world wanted that, and that's what they got. They got this. They got Billy Graham, and it sucks. It really does, because I think wrestling is has never. It's turned into a carnival act lately, and I cannot enjoy it the way I used to. Like I look at it and all I do is critique it. Like I'm just, I can't. My buddy is miserable when he goes with me. He's like, I hate going with you, and I'm like you said, they had a few guys dancing the other day. They think it's a fucking a comedy routine, you know. And I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
not here for comedy routine. Okay, if you want a comedy routine, then you could do a little bit of that, but then do that for the kids, and then build it up, and then the main event should just be balls to the wall. This is wrestling. This is the way it is. Bad guy versus good guy. Or if you want it to be, there's, Vince likes to say there's no bad guys or good guys. It's just gray, which is bullshit. Just bring back the bad guy, good guy. Bring it the way it was. I think I think she's a nice, beautiful woman, but her being in that position, if you look at the ratings, if it was anybody else, it'd be fired 6 years ago. Fuck, 10 years ago, they'd be fired. Um,
Hmm.
if it was anybody else. So they need to get somebody in there that you know. I even sent. They looked at my resume and they were like, they sent a letter back saying you would be perfect, but we're looking for a producer. And I'm like, shit, I should have said I was a producer, but um,
Right.
it was like. I just said with them I would work with the talent and there would be no writing shit, okay. I would not. There'd be very little scripted, okay, and the rest would have to come from the wrestler. Okay, you could write a little bit for them, but if they have to memorize lines, you're going to lose. And if you ever watch a movie, what turns me off, okay, it's like if you watch a wrestler and when he said, I'm a broken piece of meat, you felt like he was saying it. He wasn't reading lines, okay? Whenever you watch a movie and you see somebody reading lines, it turns me off.
Yeah.
It's like watching a porno and the girl is like you could just tell this is like, oh, am I supposed to say ouch here, you know, it does.
When you watch Raw or SmackDown, it's very stilted. It's juvenile, the dialogue. It's like anybody over the age of 8 probably would not have a vested interest in what's happening. It's robotic.
No, Evan, it's dying. It's dying. Here's the thing, Cornette. I have to agree with him. Wrestling is dying, and there's a good reason why he is such an angry man. He's a very angry man, and I'll tell you why he's a very angry man. And I would be a very angry man too. When you have a guy like a Vince Russo, and you're telling Vince McMahon this is the way you should do it, and instead of Vince doing stuff the not the right way, but just the common sense way to say, let me stick with the old guard, the guys like Cornette that kind of know the business, that know what's going to happen. I mean, but there was a great um, saying, Adrian Adonis, I love. Okay, so Adrian Adonis, a wrestler went to Adrian Adonis and said, "I have a plan for a gimmick." He said, "What's a gimmick?" Tells him the gimmick. Adrian says, "Okay, so what are you going to do the next week?" "Well, I'm going to do this." "Okay, then after that week, what are you going to do?" "Well, then I'm going to do this." "Okay, then after that week, what are you going to do?" And the guy's like, "I have no idea." And he goes, "You don't understand. You got to know what to do for the next 12 weeks, okay? You have to have a plan, okay?" And I think Vince took the easy route by going with Vince McMahon, going with Vince Russo, and saying we're gonna do this stupid shit, and then we're gonna tell everybody it's fake. And hey, wrestling blew up with Austin 316, but you didn't have Austin come out and say, by the way, they write everything for me. And if anybody were to ever write anything for Austin, Austin would slap him across the face and say, I'm not. Well, he could be in that position where he can do that. But Austin would never read that crap because he knows people love. Here's the thing about wrestling, okay? People love wrestling. True people that love wrestling love because they could believe what they're seeing. Okay, when a guy plays that like he's a little psycho, like a Brian Pillman, not the biggest guy in the world, but you believe he's a little psychopath. You believe that these
Yeah.
guys exist, that these guys are out in the real world. That my God, if I got on a train and this guy got on, um, there's that famous interview with Brian Stelter when he went with Doctor Death, or uh, what's his name, when he asked him, he said, I think wrestling's fake. And Stossel asked, was it Doctor Death? Anyways, he slapped him.
Dr. D. David Schultz.
Yeah, David Schultz slapped the shit out of him, and I loved it, and I
Yeah.
loved every second of it as a kid. And I said
He
that
has he has a book coming out.
good. It's and to me, I'm like, that's what you do. If somebody disgraces, if somebody's making fun of your business and trying to make you look stupid, then you slap the shit out of them. And I didn't. And to me, I would have slapped the living shit out of him all the way down. I don't care if Vince fired me. I'd be like, Vince, he just asked the stupidest question. Is wrestling fake? I think it's fake. I think it's a work. Well, here's a work for you, son. And I beat the living shit out of him in front of everybody. And then everybody would know right then and there that this is not a work and you don't ask those questions. Okay? And and he did the right thing. Okay? And people applaud him. Now, if a wrestler did that now, holy shit. He'd be arrested. He'd be going to jail. He'd be, it'd be a mess. And it's like, give me a break. You just bring it back to the way it was. That's all you got to do, guys. You just bring it back to the way it was, man.
Just let them wrestle.
Yeah,
Stop
stop talking.
writing endless nonsense.
Yes, exactly.
Endless promos,
Well,
endless commercials,
you know what,
endless hype.
you know what they told me? They said I don't have any soap opera experience. I'm like, I don't write for soap operas. What the hell am
Yeah.
I? What the fuck am I? Am I writing a love story? Like, when do the two guys in the ring kiss? When's the love scene to this? I go, this is not this is wrestling, man. Okay, there's no love scenes here. Okay, unless Miss Elizabeth's there or there's somebody. But this is. Anyways, I know that you got to run, but I give me, and I'm sorry, and I want to do. I ramble like an idiot, but you are. We didn't even get, guys. I feel like a schmuck and a goof because I didn't even give Evan the chance to explain. Evan knows so much about wrestling. I mean, he is the encyclopedia of wrestling. He knows the business inside and out, and I feel bad. But can you please tell the people out there about 350 days? What as much as you can, without giving away. Well, we all know what the hell 350
Sure.
means, but just give.
Basically, Billy Graham, Bret Hart, Greg Valentine, Tito Santana, 8 or 9 wrestlers who have passed since we filmed. Ox Baker, the
Yeah.
Wolfman, George the Animal Steel, etc. So on. Stan Hansen's even in it. Basically, they're just spilling their guts about being on the road, being away from the family. How tough it was with the kids, how tough it was just to live a lifestyle like that. And, it's not all grim either. They, like you said, they still love the business. They love wrestling, but, just a very, very hard lifestyle. And they go into real detail. And, Bret Hart is very introspective, and Billy Graham is so charismatic. He could read the phone book, and it would be entertaining. And
Yeah.
Billy Graham's just spilling his guts about everything he's been through to hell and back. He's had multiple surgeries, and just it's heart wrenching. It's as serious a documentary as has ever been done about the business. It's going to be out this year, and once we have a release date, we'll certainly get the word out. But I also have a documentary on Amazon that goes back a bit. It's called Wrestling Then and Now, and Killer Kowalski and Nikolai, Homicide. A bunch of guys are in it, so you can check that out.
Yeah, please
And
give me the link. I'll put a link to it. And I love stuff like that.
appreciate it.
Do you think that just one last question because I know you got to run to the show. Do you think that these guys? You said that a lot of them are, 9 or so have passed since the movie was made. Do you think that when they opened up the way they did, that they know that time is fleeting and that, you know, they're not immortal and they could go any day and they see all their friends that, I'm not trying to be grim and I don't want to be, but do you think that they just said, you know what, I got a camera in front of me and I'm just gonna tell it the way it is. I don't care what's Vince gonna do.
Well, I think they saw that we were serious. It wasn't a quote unquote shoot interview where you're in some sleazy hotel room with a camera in your face. It's an actual full length documentary, and they saw we were adults and not kids, and we weren't asking about, oh, tell us about that angle in Chattanooga in 1977. We were coming from a different place. So,
you didn't pull out the dick bag, the dick. You didn't
exactly.
do one of that shit. It's just like.
I mean, basically, we, just we opened up. They opened up to us. We opened up to. They saw we love the business and respect the business. And I'm not a kid. I'm a middle-aged guy, and some of the best nights of my life have been at pro wrestling shows, and I'm not ashamed to say that. And I'll tell you a real quick funny story. Whenever somebody does well, what's an intelligent fellow like you doing involved in pro wrestling? I'll physically show them Tiger Mask versus Dynamite Kid at the Garden because it's only 7 minutes and change.
Yeah.
And I'll say, you be honest with me, and you tell me these are not great athletes. And inevitably, they will go, wow, I never knew this. These guys are tremendous. And, they're used to the circus-like atmosphere of current WWE TV. That's how they perceive pro wrestling, and it's a much bigger picture than that.
I know.
What some of the guys we talked about tonight, what Don Morocco did was art.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's like anything else. There's good horror movies, great horror movies, god awful horror movies. It's the same thing with wrestling. Some of them are artists. Some of them are hacks. Some of the promoters are geniuses. Some of them are hacks. It is what it is. But if you appreciate the art form that is pro wrestling, where they're telling a story and you care. This is the basic thing that's missing in WWE today. You don't care.
Yeah.
The titles don't mean anything.
Yeah.
The feuds, for the most part, don't mean. The last time I cared was when Daniel Bryan was going for the championship because he was the absolute underdog. He was the little guy. That worked. That was already several years ago since I've actually cared.
Right.
So how do you watch something if you don't care? The basic of any movie.
Evan, I don't even watch. When the girls wrestle, they do nothing for me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be sexist, but I look at it and I go, you're a model. You barely, except for Ric Flair's, there's a few of them that can
Charlotte could wrestle, Natalia could wrestle, Asuka can wrestle. A lot of them, they just.
But who was my favorite and wasn't never in the WWE, or I think maybe for a little bit, was Awesome Kong.
Awesome Kong was great.
She was fantastic. I believed her as a wrestler. Luna, I believed her as a wrestler.
I'll tell you something that's great. That's wrestling related. Glow on Netflix. Awesome Kong is one of the actresses in it. That's a quality show.
Good.
It has real heart and substance to it.
Good.
And I was not a big fan of Glow, the wrestling promotion, but the show itself is really well done and heartfelt. People should check it out.
I will. I will check it out for sure. And I want to.
It's only like 9 episodes, like 9 half-hour episodes. It's not a big investment of time. It's really worth seeing.
Well, what's worth is seeing your show. This is Evan Ginsberg, and he has his own show. I believe it's every Saturday. Do you do it at 1 o'clock?
Every Sunday morning, 11 a.m. VillageConnectionRadio.com, and it's an arts program, but we do have a lot of wrestling on it, so check that out.
Yes, there's.
We have live music. It's kind of like Joe Franklin, that kind of thing, a variety show.
Yeah, that's what I
happen to have a lot of wrestling on.
Yeah, but that's what I like.
What's that?
That's what I like. I like a variety show. I'll send you a link to my old variety show, and it was fun. It was. I miss that. Now and again, call me an old shithead, but I enjoy the Dean Martin roasts. Me too. I just, to me, and it was not.
You're showing your age, man. You're showing your age. Foster
good
Brooks.
TV is good
hilarious.
TV. I show my kid. My kid just turned real quick. My kid just turned 9, and he's like, "Dad, do you mind if?" Well, my smallest one is 9, and he's like, "Dad, you mind if instead of me going to school today, do you mind if I stay home and watch the Stooges with you?" And
I love the Stooges.
I absolutely go berserk for the Stooges and Marx Brothers, W.C. Fields. So I'm like, how do you say no? So I told his mother called and said, I got a call from the school that Sterling's not in today, and I'm like, oh, he's sick, and she could hear him laughing in the
Yes,
background, and she's like, he's not watching those idiots, is she? Is he? He's
that's
not
funny.
watching those idiots, because she can't stand the Stooges, and I'm like, no, no, and he is absolutely. He loves Curly, and he's going crazy watching Curly, and you know, it breaks my heart because he's like, Dad, you should meet him. And I'm like, son, he passed away. Mo was the last one. He passed away in 1974 when I was 4 years old. Okay, there's no way I'm gonna ever see him. So that what we got are his memories, and that's the same thing with wrestling is what we got are memories. And I implore people to please watch old wrestling shows. Watch them, and you know what? You'll fall in love all over again. I'm sorry, you will. You'll look at this and go, this is what wrestling should be. This is what it is, man. Like not this shit. This firecrackers going off and this whole stupid,
Pyro.
dumb,
Yeah.
stupid shit. And I just want to see I just want to see one guy tell another guy, I'm gonna break your face, and the other guy saying, I'd like to see you try. You know, and
Simple is best.
yeah,
Simple is
yeah,
best.
keep
That's
it
right.
simple. Just keep it simple. And I think that's why Jim Cornette hates it so much because he's like, just make it the old way and bring it back.
I'll tell you why Jim Cornette hates it so much because I share much of his sentiments. Although I do love New Japan and Ring of Honor, he hates it because this is something he's devoted his life to,
Yes,
something he believes in, something that's sacred to him,
yes.
and for the most part, they've turned it into a lowbrow circus
They've turned it
and a
into
kiddie show.
a carny act. It's a carny act now.
Yeah.
And then
So it's like if you see something beautiful and it turns ugly. This is this.
hey, it's like having a.
If,
It's like
if I if I were like in 1975 and I went into a coma and I woke up today and hadn't seen wrestling in 40 plus years and I turned on WWE, I wouldn't recognize it. I'm like, what is this?
you'd fall back into a coma. I mean,
Yeah, I'd rather be in a coma than
yeah.
watch Raw.
No, I know. It's I hate shitting on stuff like that, but that's the truth, man, and it shouldn't be that way. All right, listen, you got
Especially when they have one of the greatest talent bases in
yeah.
history.
Yeah.
Bray Wyatt's great. Finn Balor's great. Some of these guys are tremendous, and
Yeah.
they're just squandered.
Yeah.
Squandered.
And do you think
On that happy note, we have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, we will. But I wanted to ask you about Triple H, but we'll do that against because that's another story. But let's leave it on a good note. Evan, thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
You're a really nice man, and thank you for
Thank
sharing
you so much.
thank you for sharing your stories. I'm so sorry for babbling like an idiot, but when I get into my wrestling, I mean, I was talking to the one girl, and she was a horror story actress, and in the middle of the interview, I'm ordering a pizza, okay? Because
Right.
I'm just so goddamn bored. I'm like, this does nothing for me, okay? But talking about wrestling just gets me going. And that's the way it should be with everybody. You should get in arguments with your buddy who's better and who's not, and that's wrestling. So, okay, without further ado, I'll let you go. I'll put up the links
All right. Thanks so much.
to your show, and go and check out. If you haven't seen The Wrestler, you've been living under a rock. And when 350 Days comes out, that's going to be huge, folks. And I guarantee you're going to love it. Thank you so much, Evan. Enjoy yourself tonight, okay? Okay, thank you.
Bye bye.
All right, folks. I'm Vito D'Amico of the Wrecking Crew. Please subscribe. If you don't, then you are Vince Russo's girlfriend. All right?